Hey, welcome back to your Daily Dose. My name is Robert, my pal Susan, and my pal Christopher. We are men of full names at this point. We have aged into that. Christopher, when you talk about being a poet, what were the barriers for you, and what maybe still are the barriers? Is it language? Is it metaphor? Is it, what is it that allows you to call yourself a poet or feel not quite a poet?
First of all, in terms of the ability to call myself, there's no rules out there. I think I did hesitate for a long. There's no governing body that says, yes, this person is a poet, this is not a poet. You know what I mean? And I only said that to say that if you are a poet, if you consider yourself a poet, then there's nobody stopping you. Okay, so so just call your, like, if you start doing it, then others will follow. The other thing I would say, more to your point, maybe a little bit more substantively, is that I think maybe beforehand I didn't really feel like I had really anything to offer. I didn't really have unique vision or anything. And so now all of a sudden I'm part of this broader community, well, it's more than just being a part of the community. If I want to take it more personally and maybe be a little bit more vulnerable about it, is that Parkinson's, you're suddenly confronted when you have this diagnosis, you're suddenly faced with sort of existential questions. Who am I, and what am I going to do with the rest of my life, and how am I going to be of use? So now you're struggling with all those kinds of questions. Now all of a sudden, like we were talking about, your career is cut short abruptly, so you have more free time. And so as you start to think about those things, at first I wrote a couple essays for, I don't know if you want to know my good buddy Alan Cole. He's got a blog here called PD Wise. So I wrote a couple essays for Alan's blog first. They were essays, not poems, but then my mind started turning towards my first love, which is poetry. And I think I wrote one or two for Alan, and then it sort of went from there. And by the way, and also I would say it's not only just the Parkinson's. I would say the period, at least up until now, I mean, maybe there's more in there, and then I'll have another one of these periods. But I would say also, by the way, the period where I was most prolific, where I was just cranking out poems, and I've heard similar things. There's a David, I might remember his name. That he's a really wonderful poet, kind of a kindred spirit, because he also speaks French, and he worked at the Department of Commerce prior, and as I did before I got my MBA with it. And so anyway, I know he had this very prolific period, and I don't know if it was the same thing for him, but for me it was when I was on pramipexole, which I don't recommend. I was pretty much like half out of my mind during that period.
Right.
I tell you, I was very prolific, very creative stuff. Again, I don't recommend that, going out of your mind for any kind of art. But
You don't.
It's tough to be sustainable, is what you're saying.
Not sustainable, yeah. But I actually, and I say this, of course, in jest, I said I have actually recommended some people get Parkinson's, though.
I have never heard that one. That's
yeah. I highly recommend it if you want to be creative and you want to be facing some existential crisis. Then yeah, Parkinson's is awesome.
So you're a former self, right? Your life before Parkinson's. What does ordinary Chris look like? How much identity was tied into that guy when you're working at the Commerce Department and such?
That was me. I mean, that was me, and that was me then, and this is me now. Gosh, well, that was not only the only part of me, of course.
I understand what I'm saying, though. I mean, how much of your work identified you as a person? Because you made some really interesting statements there about rediscovering yourself, and I think a lot of people do. This is why I ask. They define themselves by what they do instead of, like you said, more open-handedly, who am I? Right? Mm-hmm. Those are different questions. So, was that you? Were you your work prior to Parkinson's?
Yeah, we've talked about my French thing a couple of times. And so actually, it turns out my first actually professional working experience of all places was in France, not in the US. And so that was a very interesting experience for me because the French obviously have very different notions about work-life balance and all that. And so while I always worked very hard and, getting into Kellogg and all that stuff does not, it's not a thing it's not easy, but then so it took a certain amount of work and effort to get into Kellogg. And then after Kellogg, I worked at Samsung in the office of the chairman, doing international business consulting, all that kind of stuff. But even still, I never really identified myself with my work in the way that a lot of people do. Instead, I was really more focused about having first I would say being a father, being a husband. I'm divorced now, but being a father and husband was always something that was very important to me. And have an interesting life. I will say that I've always want to have an interesting life, which I've been blessed to have. So So I was never defined by my work, but I did well enough where I'm to be here where I'm sitting with you now.
I love that.
And
Susan, go out. Right. Just want to say, have an interesting life. I love that. Go ahead, Susan.
I do too. Would you tell us how you came up with the name The Quiver?
well, thanks. Yeah. So the quiver, the quiver refers to, has three elements, three pieces. The first is the quiver refers to tremor. The second, of course, is the quiver is the sort of the container that holds arrows. So just as a quiver contains arrows, this website holds sort of these pointed pieces of art. And also, you can also have a quiver of emotion when you interact when you interact with a wonderful piece of art.
Woo,
So
wow.
there you go.
You just got Susan with the quiver.
You did. You're right. You're right. And that's a wrap.
Well, I think that's going to do it for now, but it's not going to do it for us. For those who want to see more about this, please, of course, you've seen the episodes. Join us at the EACS Effort. We're going to certainly be there with Christopher, and we'll be talking more about this great artwork and this exploration, because just more people need to understand how they can be part of it, because it is the exploration of humanity. And I love that.
Yes,
Have an
please.
interesting life. What a great
Yeah, thank you. So, but let me just say here before we wrap, though, again, any artists out there, the poets, painters, photographers, you can find us on Facebook. Also, obviously, the website is thequiver.org. Also, by the way, I also kind of think of the Quiver sort of an employment program with a very lucrative, not compensation program of $0. But anyway, but really though, we do a lot of fun stuff, and as I always tell people that help out, it's never about stress or trying to meet deadlines. It's about the joy that art brings you. So yeah, so if any of those resonates with any of your listeners or viewers out there, please reach out.
Wonderful. You get the last word. Well done.